Hey everyone, and welcome. So, if you're a researcher, you know exactly what I'm talking about when I say the literature review can feel, well, monumental. But what if we could reframe that? What if it wasn't just a chore, but more like a strategic journey of discovery? That's what we're going to break down today, how a systematic approach can lay the groundwork for some seriously impactful research.
Oh, that is so true, Anya. I'm having flashbacks to my first big research project. I was just drowning in articles, right? Just grabbing random papers and basically praying they'd somehow fit together. It's such a classic mistake. But having a system, it's not just helpful, it's pretty much the lifeline that keeps your entire project from sinking. Exactly, and that lifeline really starts with one crucial difference. A traditional review, it's kind of like just wandering through a library, hoping you stumble on something good. And you might, subconsciously pick stuff that already confirms what you believe. But a systematic review? That's where the real science kicks in. It's deliberate, it's transparent, it's like having a treasure map that leads you straight to the gold.
Okay, so how do we actually do this? We've got it broken down into a few key parts for you. First up is the systematic search. Then we'll get into synthesizing the evidence. After that, we'll talk about evaluation and management. And finally, we'll see how it all comes together to build the keystone for your project.
Right. So let's dive into part one, the systematic search. The goal here is actually pretty simple, but it's twofold. First, you want to make sure you're not just redoing research that's already out there. And second, you've got to make sure your work is built on all the existing knowledge, not just a tiny little sample that was easy to find.
Okay, that sounds great in theory, but where do you even begin? Like, what's literally the first step?
The first step is honestly the most important one. You have to nail down your research question. Everything, and I mean everything, flows from that. Once you've got a really sharp, clear question, then you can start thinking about which databases to use and what your search terms should be. A focused question is basically your North Star through this whole thing.
Right, but I've heard so many researchers get totally bogged down in all those confusing acronyms for framing questions, like PICO, Spider. What's the deal with those?
That's a great question, Ben. Look, these frameworks are just tools to make your questions super precise. PICO is your go-to for quantitative, clinical-type questions. Think, in adult patients with type 2 diabetes, that's your population, does a new drug, the intervention, compared to a placebo, the comparator, reduce blood sugar levels, the outcome? See? Super specific. Spider, though, is built for qualitative research. It's more about experiences. So you might ask, what are the experiences, evaluation, of nursing faculty, sample, who have used the library's consulting service, phenomenon of interest? It just helps you focus on what you're really trying to find out.
Okay, so once that question is locked in, you have to search multiple databases. Seriously, just using one is a huge pitfall. You've got PubMed, which is the absolute giant in biomedical fields, Web of Science, and Scopus. They're amazing for tracking citations to see who's referencing what. Oh, and don't sleep on Google Scholar. It's kind of a secret weapon for what we call gray literature, and that's just a fancy term for super valuable research, like dissertations or government reports that didn't get published in a traditional journal, but could have some game-changing insight. Okay, hold on. Searching all those databases could give you literally thousands of results. How in the world do you start to narrow that down? This is where you get to use your new superpowers, Boolean operators. Seriously, they're your best friends here. As you can see, they're basically just filters. Using AND is like using a spotlight. It only finds articles with all of your terms. Or is a much wider beam, great for catching synonyms. And not, well, that's like a shield. It blocks out stuff you don't want, like medication in this search.
And this is crucial. You have to write all of this down. I mean, every database you searched, every single term you used. Why? Well, it all comes down to transparency and reproducibility. The goal is that someone else could follow your exact steps and get the same results. Following guidelines like PRISMA, well, it's not just good practice, it's what gives your entire review credibility out in the academic world.
And believe me, this process really, really works. I mean, we've seen case studies where a smart search strategy started with a pool of over 2,000 articles and whittled it all the way down to the 50 most relevant papers. Think about that. The amount of time and effort you save is just incredible. It's a total game changer for efficiency and focus.
All right, so that brings us to part two. We did our systematic search. We found our 50 golden articles. Now what? What do we actually do with them? Well, this next part is all about shifting gears from just collecting data to actually creating new knowledge.
Exactly. The point here isn't to write 50 mini book reports. No way. It's about weaving all their findings together. I like to think of it like being a detective. You're looking for patterns across a bunch of different witness statements. And tools like thematic analysis or a synthesis matrix, they're what help you organize all that evidence so you can finally see the big picture, the story that no single paper could tell you on its own.
And check this out. This is what that synthesis can actually look like when you visualize it. This heat map is basically a map of the research landscape. The bright red spots, those are the hot topics. Think of them like crowded parties where everyone is talking about the exact same thing. But look at those cooler bluish areas. That's the frontier. Those are the totally unexplored territories where your original contribution can make a massive difference. Okay, so can you give us the straight-up definition? What exactly counts as a research gap?
Absolutely. Gap analysis is just the formal name for the process of finding what's missing. And a gap can be a few different things. It could be a knowledge gap, something we literally just don't know, or maybe a methodological gap, where a topic has only ever been studied one way. Sometimes it's conflicting findings that need someone to figure out what's really going on, or it's a whole population that's been ignored. Finding one of these genuine gaps, that's what turns a literature review from a summary into a launchpad for your own original research.
All right, and that brings us to our final big section, critical evaluation and reference management. So you've found your articles, you've spotted a gap. Awesome. But here's the thing, not all evidence is created equal. This next stage is all about making sure the foundation you're building on is solid rock, not sand. So how can a researcher be sure that the studies they found are actually any good? How do you know they're reliable? You have to put on your critic's hat and appraise them. And you can use standardized tools like the CASP checklist to do it. They help you check for things like bias. I like the courtroom analogy. You have to be the judge. You need to know if a witness might be biased or if the evidence was collected properly. These tools help you spot the kinds of flaws that could totally throw off a study's results. Okay, and last but not least, managing dozens or even hundreds of citations sounds like an absolute nightmare. Any tools you recommend to avoid that headache? Oh, you 100% need a reference manager. It's a non-negotiable. It'll save you from accidental plagiarism and just countless hours of tedious work. The big three you'll hear about are EndNote, Mendeley, and Zotero. EndNote is the powerhouse that works great with university libraries. Mendeley is fantastic for teams and has a really solid free version. And Zotero is the open source champion, super flexible. Honestly, picking the right one just depends on your workflow, your budget, and if you're flying solo or working with a team. And there you have it. That right there is the keystone. You see how each piece, the systematic search, the careful synthesis, the critical evaluation, they all lock into place to create this incredibly strong, unshakable foundation for your entire research project. So if you take away one thing, it's this. Think of it as a journey with three major landmarks. The search is where you find your foundation. The synthesis is where you find the gaps in the map. And the evaluation is what ensures your entire journey, your work, has integrity. You know, when you master these steps, you're not just summarizing what other people have done anymore. You're actually setting the stage for your own work. Your next big breakthrough is out there, waiting in one of those gaps. So the only real question left is, what will you discover?